May 8th, 2008. Thursday night, 10:15 p.m. The Viridian restaurant in Chelsea, Manhattan. This wasn't one of those flashy places you see on Instagram. This was old New York. Dark wood, leather booths, the kind of steakhouse where deals got made and secrets got buried. The kind of place where you didn't ask questions about the men in the corner booth, and you definitely didn't stare. That night, that corner booth became the center of something nobody saw coming. A man rose to his feet. Expensive suit, probably cost more than most people made in a month. Dominic Thorne, 32 years old, handsome in that dangerous way that made people nervous. He controlled Staten Island and parts of Lower Manhattan. When he walked into a room, people noticed. When he spoke, people listened. Right then he wasn't speaking, he was about to explode. His palm slammed down on the wooden table. The sound cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The bartender's hand hovered over a whiskey bottle. Everyone turned. Standing in front of him was a waitress, 7 months pregnant. Her name tag said Elisa. She was holding an order pad, looking small and tired in her black uniform. She didn't look like someone who deserved what was about to happen. Dominic pointed at her belly. His voice rose, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't care who you are, or who you think you are. You spilled my water, you pathetic, clumsy disaster." Elisa stood there. She didn't move, didn't speak. "Get out!" His voice got louder, angrier. "Get out of this city! I never want to see your face here again! You are trash and you are fired!" The whole restaurant froze. See, there were rules in this world. Unwritten rules. You didn't touch women. You didn't yell at pregnant women. You especially didn't publicly humiliate a pregnant waitress in front of 50 witnesses who all knew exactly who you were. Dominic had just broken every single one of those rules. He sat back down, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. Mission accomplished. The humiliation was complete. Public, devastating, career-ending. She'd be out of the city by morning. That was what he'd been told to do, and he did it. But Elisa didn't cry. She didn't run. She didn't beg for her job back. She just stood there for a moment. Calm. Completely calm. Then she leaned in. Just slightly. Just enough so Dominic could hear her clearly. But here's the thing about moments like that, when 50 people were holding their breath in complete silence. Sound carried. Whispers became announcements. She wasn't even looking at Dominic when she spoke. Her eyes were locked on someone else, a man sitting alone at the bar, nursing a drink, trying very hard to look like he wasn't paying attention. Elisa's voice was steady, cold. Each word dropped into that silence like stones into still water. "Tell Silas Sterling that his insurance policy is a lie and that Frankie is already talking to Boston." The air got sucked out of the room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone there knew that name. Silas Sterling, the owner of this restaurant, the man who knew everyone's secrets, the facilitator, the kingmaker, the one person in New York you did not cross. And this pregnant waitress had just declared war on him, in his own restaurant, in front of everyone who mattered. Dominic's face went white. Not because she threatened him. She didn't. She didn't even acknowledge him. She used him. Used his voice, his spectacle, his public display to deliver a message to someone else entirely. The man at the bar, the one she'd been looking at, drained his drink in one gulp. He stood up fast, too fast, and headed for the back exit. He was practically running. The room erupted in whispers. Urgent, shocked, confused. Dominic sat there, his mind racing. Insurance policy, Frankie, Boston. None of it made sense. He was just supposed to fire a waitress, scare her out of town. Simple, clean. But nothing about this was simple. He looked around the restaurant. Every powerful person in that room had just heard what she said. They were all looking at him now, not with fear, with something worse, curiosity, calculation. They were wondering what role he played in whatever just got exposed. Footsteps, heavy ones, coming from the private side entrance that only staff and VIPs used. Dominic turned. A man walked through the door. Older, silver hair, perfect suit. Not a wrinkle, not a hair out of place. Silas Sterling, the man himself. He was there, right then. He wasn't supposed to be there that night, but he was. And from the look on his face, He'd heard every single word. But to understand how one sentence could detonate an empire, how a pregnant waitress could destroy a man more powerful than most politicians, how a routine firing turned into the most dangerous moment of Dominic Thorne's life, we needed to go back 3 weeks. Back to when Dominic thought he was in control. Back to when he thought he understood the game. Back to the moment he made a deal that would cost him everything. Now, before we go back to where this all began, let me ask you something. Have you ever been to Chelsea, Manhattan? Maybe you've walked past the Viridian without even knowing the secrets hidden behind those mahogany doors. If you're watching from New York, drop a yes in the comments right now. And if you're watching from anywhere else in the world, tell me, where are you watching this story unfold from? But here's the thing. This story almost didn't reach you. YouTube's algorithm buries videos like this unless you engage. If you want to see how one sentence destroyed a man's entire empire, you need to hit that like button right now. Comment below, share this with someone who loves a good plot twist, and subscribe, because what happens next, most people will never see coming. And trust me, you don't want to be the one who missed it. Now, let's go back 3 weeks and see how a desperate man made a deal with the devil. 3 weeks earlier. April 17th. 2008. A Tuesday morning that started like any other and ended with Dominic Thorne realizing his entire world was collapsing. He sat in his office in Staten Island, staring at spreadsheets that didn't make sense anymore. Numbers that should have been black were bleeding red. A year ago, this office belonged to someone else. A man named Vincent Moretti. Vinny ran this territory for 15 years before he died. Sudden, convenient. Nobody asked too many questions because nobody wanted the answers. Dom inherited everything. The territory, the operations, the connections. At 32, he became one of the youngest bosses in New York. People said he was lucky. People said he was smart. What people didn't say out loud was that Vinny's death came at exactly the right time for exactly the right person. Dom didn't deal in street violence like the old bosses. He was modern, sophisticated, financial manipulation, development deals, construction contracts, clean money hiding dirty operations. That was his specialty. That was supposed to be his edge. Except now, that edge was cutting his throat. 6 months ago, he'd made a move, a big one, a development project in the financial district. Luxury condos, prime real estate, the kind of deal that would cement his reputation and triple his operations' cash flow. He put in everything, not just his money, money from associates, money from people who trusted him, money from people who didn't forgive mistakes. Then the zoning changed, overnight, completely illegal, completely unexpected. The project died. The investors lost millions, Dom's millions. And the thing about money in his world, it wasn't just numbers on paper. It was respect. It was power. It was the difference between being a boss and being a target. Someone set him up. He knew it in his gut. The zoning change was too precise, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. But he couldn't prove it, couldn't trace it, couldn't find the enemy hiding in plain sight. And now, 3 weeks before that night at the Viridian, Dom was facing the one thing that terrified every boss in New York. He looked weak. Weakness in his world wasn't just embarrassing. It was fatal. Rivals smelled blood. Associates started taking calls from other crews. The whole structure was cracking, and he had maybe 2 weeks before it shattered completely. Robert Esposito walked into the office without knocking. Robbie, Dom's consigliere, sharp, calculating, the kind of guy who saw 3 moves ahead while everyone else was still figuring out the first one. He was 45, dressed like a lawyer, talked like a professor, and thought like a chess master. "We need to talk," Robbie said, closing the door behind him. Dom didn't look up from the spreadsheets. "Unless you're about to tell me you found $8 million, I don't want to hear it." "I found a way to get $8 million. That got Dom's attention. He leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening." Robbie sat down across from him. "Silas Sterling." Dom's jaw tightened. "No." "Yes." "Silas doesn't do loans, Robbie. He does leverage. You go to him for money. You don't just owe him cash. You owe him your soul." "I know," Robbie said. "But we're out of options. You can't go to the banks. You can't go to our usual channels because everyone knows we're bleeding. Word's already out on the street. By next week, we'll have crews from Brooklyn testing our territory. By next month, we won't have a territory. Dom stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Staten Island. His island. For now. What does Silas want? He asked. I don't know, Robbie admitted. But whatever it is, it's better than watching everything we built disappear. You inherited this operation clean. You brought it into the modern age. You can't let one bad deal destroy that. One bad deal that someone engineered, Dom said. Someone wanted me to fail. Someone wanted this project to collapse. Then survive first, Robbie said. Figure out who betrayed you later. But right now you need cash, and Silas has it. He owns that restaurant, the Viridian. Neutral ground. Safe. We set up a meeting. You talk to him. You see what the price is. Dom turned away from the window. And if the price is too high? Robbie stood up. Then we're having this same conversation next week, except by then, you won't be a boss anymore. You'll just be another guy who had a shot and blew it. The words hit harder than they should have, because Robbie was right. Dom had spent a year building his reputation as the smart one, the strategic one, the one who didn't need violence to maintain power. But reputation meant nothing without resources, and resources were disappearing fast. Set up the meeting, Dom said finally. Tomorrow night. The Viridian. Robbie nodded. I'll make the call. And Robbie? Dom's voice dropped. Find out who sabotaged that zoning. I don't care what it takes. Someone in this city destroyed that deal, and when I find out who, they're going to wish they'd just put a bullet in my head instead. Robbie left. The door closed. Dom was alone again with the spreadsheets and the growing certainty that whatever happened tomorrow night at the Viridian would change everything. He just didn't know how much. He couldn't have known that the man he was about to meet didn't just hold the keys to $8 million. He held the keys to Dom's entire future, and the price for that kind of salvation wasn't going to be measured in money. It was going to be measured in something far more dangerous. Choice. Loyalty. The willingness to do one thing, no questions asked, when the time came. Dom thought he was going to negotiate a loan. He had no idea he was about to sell his soul. April 18th, 2008. Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Dom arrived at the Viridian 15 minutes early. Not because he was eager, because in his world, showing up late to a meeting with someone like Silas Sterling was the kind of disrespect that got remembered. And Dom needed this to go smoothly. Robbie had made the call that morning. By noon, they had confirmation. Tonight, booth 12. Come alone. The host recognized Dom the moment he walked in, didn't ask for a name. Just nodded toward the back of the restaurant, past the bar, past the tables where well-dressed men ate prime rib and pretended not to notice each other. Booth 12 sat in the corner, private, positioned so whoever sat facing out could see the entire restaurant, every entrance, every exit, a tactician's seat, a paranoid's dream. Silas Sterling was already there. He was older than Dom expected, mid-50s maybe. Silver hair combed perfectly, tan that said expensive vacations, not construction sites. His suit probably cost 5 figures. He looked like a banker, talked like a diplomat, moved like a man who'd never been afraid of anything in his entire life. That was the thing about Silas. He wasn't a boss. He didn't run crews or control territory. He was something more dangerous. He was the man who connected people. The one who knew which politician needed campaign money, which developer needed permits, which family needed to move product through which docks. He was the infrastructure. The invisible hand that kept the whole corrupt machine running. You didn't threaten Silas. You didn't pressure him. You came to him with respect, and you paid whatever price he named, because the alternative was trying to navigate New York's underworld without a map. Dominic, Silas said, gesturing to the seat across from him. His voice was smooth, cultured, not a trace of accent. Thank you for coming. Dom slid into the booth. A waiter appeared immediately with 2 glasses of scotch. Top shelf. The waiter didn't ask what they wanted. He just knew. I appreciate you making time, Dom said. Silas smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Robbie said you needed liquidity, substantial liquidity. 8 million. That's correct. And you need it quickly. Within 48 hours. Dom nodded. No point dancing around it. Silas already knew everything anyway. The financial district project collapsed. I took losses I can't absorb. If I don't cover them immediately, my entire operation becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable, Silas repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice. Not bankrupt, not destroyed. Vulnerable. I prefer honesty. I prefer it too. Silas took a sip of his scotch. So, let's be honest. You didn't just lose money on that project. You lost something more valuable. Credibility. Your associates are nervous. Your rivals are circling. You need cash, yes, but what you really need is the appearance of stability. You need everyone to believe you're still in control. Dom said nothing. Because Silas was right. I can provide that, Silas continued. 8 million, clean, untraceable, delivered tomorrow morning. Your investors get made whole. Your operation stabilizes. Your reputation recovers. 6 months from now, this whole mess will be a footnote. What's the interest rate? Silas laughed. Actually laughed. Dominic, I don't charge interest. I'm not a loan shark. I'm an investor in people. Then what's the price? Silas set down his glass, leaned forward. The smile disappeared. An insurance policy, he said. One day, probably not soon, I'm going to need you to do something for me. One thing. I will tell you what it is, and you will do it. No questions, no negotiations, no hesitation. Exactly as I ask. Dom felt cold. That's vague. That's intentional. You could ask me to do anything. I could, Silas agreed. But I won't ask you to do something impossible. I won't ask you to hurt your family. I won't ask you to destroy yourself. What I will ask is that you trust my judgment about what needs to be done, and you execute it perfectly. And if I refuse when the time comes, Silas's expression didn't change. Then you'll wish you'd refused tonight, but you won't refuse tonight. We both know that. Because you're out of options, and I'm the only person in this city who can help you. Dom stared at him. This was the moment. This was the choice. Accept these terms and walk out with his empire intact. Refuse and watch everything collapse within a week. It wasn't really a choice at all. How do I know you won't ask me to do something that will destroy me anyway? Dom asked. You don't, Silas said simply. That's what makes it an insurance policy. It only pays out under specific circumstances. But here's what I will tell you. I don't waste assets. You're valuable to me as a functioning boss, not as a ruined man. Whatever I ask, it will serve both our interests. You just won't understand how until it's done. The waiter reappeared with a leather folder. Silas opened it. Inside was a simple agreement. 1 page. The terms were exactly as he'd described. 8 million in exchange for one future favor, specifications to be determined. There's no contract that would hold up in court, Dom said. Correct, Silas said. This is an agreement between men of honor. Your signature means you're bound, not by law, by something more reliable. Reputation. Break this agreement, and every person in this city will know you're a man who doesn't keep his word. You'll be finished. Not by violence, by isolation. Dom picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the paper. Silas waited. Patient. He'd done this before. He knew how this ended. Dom signed. Silas countered, signed, slid the paper into the folder, snapped it shut. The money will be in your account by 9 tomorrow morning, he said. Use it wisely. Rebuild your reputation. And when I call, and I will call, remember this moment. Remember that you chose this. Remember that you agreed. Dom stood up. His legs felt weak. How will you contact me? I'll know where to find you, Silas said. I always do. Dom walked out of the Viridian with his empire saved and his soul mortgaged to a man he barely knew. The night air hit his face, cold, sharp. He breathed deep. Behind him, in booth 12, Silas Sterling sat alone, finishing his scotch, already planning for the day when he'd collect on his investment. And that day, though neither man knew it yet, was exactly 3 weeks away. Same week, April 2008. Elisa Fiore's shift started at 6 p.m. and ended whenever the last customer left. Usually around midnight, sometimes later. Her feet hurt, her back hurt. Everything hurt when you were 7 months pregnant and spent 8 hours carrying plates of steak and bottles of wine to men who barely looked at you. She preferred it that way, being invisible. The Viridian wasn't like other restaurants. The tips were good, sometimes great, but the customers weren't there for the food. They were there for the privacy. the discretion. The kind of conversations that happened in low voices over expensive scotch. Elisa had worked there for 2 years, started right after she arrived in New York from Boston. She needed work, needed it fast, and she needed the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions about where you came from or why you left. The manager hired her on the spot, paid her cash for the first 3 months until her paperwork came through. She never asked how he got that paperwork. She just said thank you and showed up on time. Tonight, she was working the back section, the booths, the corner spots where the serious meetings happened. She'd learned early on to keep her eyes down, her ears closed, and her mouth shut. She took orders, delivered food, refilled drinks, and disappeared. That was the job. That was survival. She'd seen Dominic Thorne that night, recognized him from the newspapers, the gossip, the whispered conversations between other staff members. Young boss, inherited his territory last year. Dangerous but smart, the kind of man you didn't stare at. He'd been sitting with Silas Sterling, her boss. Well, technically Silas owned the building and about 6 other businesses in Manhattan, but he was rarely there. Seeing him in person was unusual. Seeing him deep in conversation with someone like Thorne was significant. Elisa didn't care. Wasn't her business. She had her own problems. The medical bill sat in her apartment. $3,000. Routine prenatal care that her insurance, the bare minimum coverage, refused to pay. Something about pre-existing conditions, paperwork errors, denials that didn't make sense. She'd called 6 times, got nowhere. $3,000 might as well be $3 million. She had maybe $400 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The baby was coming in 2 months. The math didn't work. The math never worked. She couldn't ask anyone here for help, couldn't draw attention, couldn't let anyone wonder too much about her situation. Single, pregnant, no family, no history anyone could verify. The less people knew, the safer she was. But safety didn't pay medical bills. Boston kept creeping back into her thoughts. The life she'd left, the people she'd left. She'd been so careful. Changed her phone number, closed her social media, told nobody where she was going. For 2 years it worked. She'd been invisible, free. Now she was desperate, and desperation made people stupid. She had one thing of value. A ring. Gold. Old. It belonged to someone from her past, someone she'd loved once, someone she'd run from. She'd kept it because selling it felt like admitting she'd never go back, never have that life again, but that life was gone anyway, had been gone the moment she left. The ring was worth something, maybe not $3,000, but enough to buy time, enough to make a payment, enough to keep the hospital from sending her bills to collections. She needed someone to sell it for her, someone who knew the market, someone from Boston who wouldn't ask questions. Her break came at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes. She went to the back alley behind the kitchen, where the dumpsters were, and the staff smoked cigarettes. Pulled out her phone, stared at the contact she'd never deleted but never called. Frankie DeLuca. Small time. Harmless. He used to run errands for the crews in Boston. Nothing serious. Just a guy who knew people, made connections, moved things that needed moving. He owed her a favor from years ago. She'd covered for him once when he screwed up a pickup. Took the blame. Saved him from a beating. He'd said if she ever needed anything, call him. She needed something now. Her thumb hovered over his name. This was risky. Calling anyone from Boston was risky. But Frankie was low level. Nobody important. He wouldn't talk. He'd help her sell the ring, take his cut, and forget about it. She pressed call. It rang 3 times. Then his voice. Yeah? Frankie, it's Elisa. Silence. Then, Elisa? Holy hell! Where are you? Everyone thought you were dead. I need a favor, she said. I have something to sell. A ring. Gold. I need it done quiet. Can you help? Another pause. She could hear him thinking, Yeah, I can do that. Where are you? New York. New York? He repeated. You've been in New York this whole time? Can you help or not? I can help. Send me a picture of the ring. I'll see what it's worth. Thank you. Elisa, his voice dropped. Does anyone know you're there? No, and it stays that way. You understand? I understand. Send the picture. I'll take care of it. She hung up, took a photo of the ring, sent it. Her break was over. She went back inside, back to her section, back to being invisible. She didn't know that sending that photo was the biggest mistake of her life. Didn't know that Frankie DeLuca wasn't the harmless errand boy she remembered. Didn't know that he'd see that ring and recognize it immediately. Didn't know that he'd see an opportunity bigger than selling jewelry. She just knew she needed $3,000 to survive. And survival, she'd learned, always came with a price. Frankie DeLuca stared at the photo on his phone. A gold ring. Simple band, engraved on the inside with initials. VM. He knew those initials. Vincent Moretti. Vinny. Captain in the Boston family under Lucia Giordano, the woman everyone called the Contessa. Vinny had been a rising star. Brutal when he needed to be, smart when it counted. Word was, he'd been running operations in New York before he died last year. Car accident. Or that was the official story anyway. Frankie zoomed in on the photo. This wasn't just any ring. This was Vinny's mother's ring, the one he inherited when she passed. The one he wore on a chain around his neck because it was too small for his fingers. The one that disappeared when he died. And now Elisa Fiore had it. Elisa. Vinny's girl. The one who vanished 2 years ago without a word. Just gone. Poof. People assumed she got scared, ran off, maybe ended up dead in a ditch somewhere. Nobody looked too hard. Girlfriends came and went in that world. But she wasn't dead. She was in New York. And from the sound of her voice, the desperation in it, she was in trouble. Frankie sat in his apartment in South Boston, the kind of place where the heat barely worked and the neighbors minded their own business. He'd been running small jobs for years, pickups, deliveries, selling stolen goods. Nothing major, nothing that would get him noticed. That was the key to survival in his world. Stay small, stay invisible, don't get greedy. Except now, staring at that ring, he saw something he'd never seen before. Opportunity. He opened his laptop, started searching. Took him 20 minutes to find what he needed. Social media was a beautiful thing, even for people trying to stay hidden. A friend of a friend had posted a photo 6 months ago. Background showed a restaurant. Fancy place. He reverse image searched it. The Viridian. Chelsea, Manhattan. He found their website, scanned the staff photos. There she was. Different hair. Fuller face from the pregnancy. But definitely Elisa. She was working there, right out in the open, hiding in plain sight in a restaurant that, according to his research, was owned by Silas Sterling. Frankie knew that name. Everyone in their world knew that name. Sterling was connected to everyone. Boston, New York, Philadelphia. He wasn't in the families, but he was essential to them. The middleman, the facilitator, the guy who made impossible things possible. And Elisa was working in his restaurant. Frankie leaned back in his chair. His mind raced. Elisa was pregnant. 7 months, looked like. She'd been gone from Boston for 2 years. That meant she was pregnant when she left, or got pregnant right after. Either way, if that baby was Vinny's, and Frankie was pretty sure it was, then she was carrying the heir to a dead captain's legacy. The Giordano family would want to know about that. Lucia Giordano protected her people's children. Always. It was part of her reputation. Family first, blood first. But here was the interesting part. If Silas Sterling knew who Elisa was, why was she still alive? Why was she working in his restaurant? And if he didn't know, what would happen when he found out? Frankie's hands were shaking, not from fear, from excitement. He could sell the ring like Elisa asked, make maybe $500, pay his rent, buy groceries, stay small and invisible. Or he could make a different play. He grabbed his phone, made 3 calls. The first 2 were to contacts in New York, low-level guys who owed him favors. They confirmed what he suspected. Vinny Moretti had been working with Silas Sterling on some development deal before he died. Big money. Then Vinny died, and some young guy named Dominic Thorne took over his territory. The third call was to a guy who worked in city records. Cost Frankie $200 he couldn't afford, but the information was worth it. Vinny's death wasn't an accident. It was too clean, too convenient, too perfectly timed. Someone wanted Vinny gone. Frankie sat there, pieces falling into place. Sterling and Vinny were partners. Vinny died. Thorne took over. Elisa disappeared. Now, she was working for Sterling, pregnant with Vinny's kid, and nobody knew. This wasn't random. This was connected. All of it. And that meant Elisa wasn't just a waitress. She was a secret, a loose end, a liability. And secrets were valuable. Frankie wasn't a brave man. Never had been. He'd spent his whole life avoiding risk, staying quiet, doing what he was told. But he also wasn't stupid. This was the kind of information that could change his life. Set him up. Get him out of this apartment and into something better. He just had to be smart about it. He couldn't go to the Giordano family. They'd take the information and give him nothing. Might even hurt him for knowing too much. But Sterling? Sterling paid for problems to go away. Sterling paid for silence. Sterling paid to keep his operations clean. Frankie picked up his phone, found the number for the Viridian, called. "Good evening, the Viridian. I need to speak with Silas Sterling. Tell him it's about Elisa Fiore and Vincent Moretti's child. Tell him I have proof. And tell him if he doesn't call me back in 1 hour, I'm making a call to Boston." He left his number. Hung up. His heart was hammering. His mouth was dry. He'd just threatened one of the most dangerous men in New York. But he'd also just bought himself a ticket out of poverty. Or a ticket to an early grave. 45 minutes later, his phone rang. Unknown number. Frankie answered. "This is Silas Sterling," the voice said. Calm, smooth, terrifying. "You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you killed for making threats." Frankie swallowed hard. "I know who your pregnant waitress is. I know whose kid she's carrying. And I know the Giordano family would pay good money to find out where Vinny Moretti's child is. Unless you'd prefer to pay me first." Silence. Then, "How much?" "500,000. "You're insane." "I'm motivated. And I have proof. Vinny's ring. Photos. Connections. You pay me. I disappear." "You don't pay me. Boston finds out their captain's heir is living in your restaurant." Another pause. "I'll call you back." The line went dead. Frankie sat there, shaking now. Not from excitement, from fear. He'd just extorted Silas Sterling. He'd either just made the smartest move of his life, or the last move of his life. 2 days before the incident, May 6th, 2008, Tuesday afternoon. Silas Sterling hung up the phone with Frankie DeLuca and sat perfectly still for 3 full minutes. He was in his private office above the Viridian, the one most people didn't know existed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Chelsea. A view worth millions, a position worth more. He'd built his empire on information, knowing what others didn't, anticipating problems before they became disasters, controlling situations before they controlled him. This was a problem. Frankie was a coward, small-time, the kind of guy who'd sell out his own mother for a few $1,000s, but cowards were unpredictable when they got desperate, and desperate people made noise. Silas couldn't afford noise, not about Elisa, not about Vinny, not about what really happened a year ago when Vincent Moretti's car went off that bridge. He'd promised Elisa protection, promised her safety in exchange for information. She'd been feeding him details about Vinny's operations for months before Vinny died. She'd wanted out, wanted to raise her child somewhere clean, somewhere safe. Silas had offered her that. A job, a new identity, distance from Boston. But that protection only worked if nobody knew who she was. Frankie knew. And Frankie wanted $500,000. Silas could pay it. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that paying blackmail never solved the problem. It just delayed it. Frankie would come back in 6 months asking for more. Then, a year later, more again. Blackmailers never stopped. They just got greedier. No. Frankie needed to be handled, permanently. But first, Elisa needed to be gone. Out of the city, out of sight, before Frankie could make good on his threat to contact Boston. The cleanest way to make her disappear was to give her a reason to run, make her afraid, make her believe staying in New York was more dangerous than leaving. Silas picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, found the name he needed, Dominic Thorne. 3 weeks ago, Dom had signed papers promising one favor, no questions, no hesitation. Silas had helped him, stabilized his empire, made him whole. Now it was time to collect. He made the call. Dom answered on the second ring. Sterling. "Dominic, I hope I'm not interrupting. What do you need?" Dom's voice was cautious. He'd been expecting this call. Just not this soon. I'm cashing in the policy, Silas said simply. Thursday night. The Viridian. 10:15 p.m. Silence on the other end. Then, all right, what's the job? There's a waitress working my restaurant, 7 months pregnant. Her name is Elisa. I need you to make a scene. Public, loud, humiliate her, verbally destroy her, terrify her so completely that she quits and leaves the city immediately. More silence. Longer this time. You want me to yell at a pregnant woman, Dom said slowly. In public. Yes. Why? That's a question, Silas said. We agreed. No questions. This is different. I don't hurt women. I don't touch pregnant women. That's a line. I'm not asking you to touch her. I'm asking you to scare her. Make your display so frightening, so humiliating, that no one in this city will hire her again. She needs to leave New York. Tonight, you're going to give her every reason to do exactly that. Dom's voice hardened. What did she do? Dominic. What did she do to deserve this? Silas's tone didn't change. Still calm. Still smooth. But underneath, steel. She's a loose end. A very minor one. But loose ends must be cut. You do this, and your debt to me is cleared. You don't do this, and the leverage I have will be used. Your organization will collapse by morning. Every vulnerable point, every weakness, every secret deal you've made in the past 3 weeks to stabilize your position will be exposed. You'll be finished. You're asking me to destroy an innocent woman to save myself. I'm asking you to honor an agreement you made freely. You knew the terms. You accepted them. Now you execute them. Dom said nothing. Silas could hear him breathing, could practically hear him calculating, weighing options, searching for alternatives. There weren't any. She's just a witness, Silas added. Wrong place, wrong time. She saw something she shouldn't have. This is cleanup. Simple. Necessary. You make the scene Thursday night. She runs. Everyone wins. Except her. She's alive. That's winning in our world. Dom was quiet for a long moment. Then, no violence. None. Just words. Loud ones. And this clears my debt. Completely. We're square. You never hear from me again unless you need a favor. Another pause. Silas waited. He knew how this ended. Dom had no choice. He'd known that the moment he signed those papers 3 weeks ago. Thursday night, Dom said finally. His voice was hollow. 10:15. Booth 12. She'll be working the back section. When she approaches your table, you execute. Everyone in that restaurant needs to witness it. Everyone needs to see Dominic Thorne at his most terrifying. I understand. Good. Oh, and Dominic? If she doesn't leave the city by Friday morning, I'll consider the agreement void. Make sure she understands that staying is not an option. Silas hung up. He sat back in his chair, looked out at the city. Dom would do exactly as instructed. He was desperate, cornered, and too smart to throw away everything for moral posturing. Thursday night, Elisa would be publicly humiliated. Friday morning, she'd be gone. Her brother would take her somewhere safe. Somewhere far from Boston, far from New York, far from Frankie's greed. And Frankie himself? He'd be dealt with separately, quietly. He'd never make it home Thursday night. All problems solved, all loose ends tied. Silas Sterling had built his empire on moments like this. Cold calculation, ruthless efficiency, no hesitation. He didn't feel good about using Dom to do his dirty work, but he didn't feel bad either. This was business, and in business, someone always paid the price. This time, it just happened to be a pregnant waitress and the young boss who thought he could play with devils without getting burned. Across town, Dom Thorne sat in his office, staring at his phone. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from disgust. He'd built his reputation on being smarter than the old bosses, more strategic, less violent. And now he was going to spend Thursday night yelling at a pregnant woman because a man he barely knew demanded it. Robbie walked in, took one look at Dom's face. What happened? Sterling called in his favor. Already? What does he want? Dom told him. Everything. The waitress. The public humiliation. The deadline. Robbie sat down slowly. That's the favor? That's what he wanted? That's it. Then she knows something. Something big. Something he can't risk getting out. I don't care what she knows, Dom said. I care that I'm about to become the man who terrorizes pregnant women. You don't have a choice. I know. Then you do it. You do it and you live with it. That's the price of the deal you made. Dom looked at him. When does it stop? When do we stop paying for the choices we make? Robbie stood up, headed for the door, stopped, turned back. Never, he said. We never stop paying, that's the job. He left. Dom was alone. Thursday night. Booth 12. 10:15 p.m. He had 2 days to prepare for the most distasteful act of his career. 2 days to become the villain in someone else's story. 2 days before everything changed. Stop right here for a second. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. If your entire life's work, everything you built, everyone who depends on you, was about to collapse, and the only way to save it was to do something that goes against everything you believe in, would you do it? Would you humiliate an innocent person to save yourself? Here's what I want you to do. Drop a comment below. If you think Dom is wrong and should refuse, type refuse. If you think he has no choice and survival comes first, type survive. I want to see where you stand, because here's the truth. It's easy to judge from the outside, but when you're the one trapped, morality gets complicated. And listen, if you're actually invested in this story, if you want to know what that pregnant waitress says that freezes an entire room full of dangerous men, then you need to like this video. Share it with someone who thinks they'd never compromise their values. Subscribe, because what's coming in the next chapter will make you question everything you just decided. The algorithm only pushes content that people engage with. If you don't engage, this story dies here. Don't let that happen. Now, let's see what happens on that Thursday night. Thursday, May 8th, 2008, 10 p.m. Dom Thorne stood outside the Viridian, staring at the entrance. 2 days. He'd had 2 days to prepare for this, and he still felt sick. He'd rehearsed the words, practiced the rage. Robbie had even helped him plan it out, treating it like any other operation. Go in, make the scene, get out, simple, clinical. Don't think about the morality, just execute. But standing there, feeling the spring air on his face, knowing what he was about to do, Dom felt like he was about to step off a cliff. He'd crossed lines before, made people disappear, ruined competitors, taken things that didn't belong to him. That was the job. That was the world he'd chosen. But this felt different. This felt personal, cruel in a way that didn't serve strategy or survival. This was just hurting someone because a more powerful man demanded it. He checked his watch. 10:02 p.m. No more stalling. Dom walked inside. The host recognized him immediately, didn't ask questions, just gestured toward the back, the same path he'd walked 3 weeks ago when he'd come to beg Silas Sterling for money, when he'd signed away his freedom for $8 million. The restaurant was half full, not packed, but busy enough. Dom recognized faces, a developer he'd worked with, a union boss from Brooklyn, a lawyer who defended connected guys, a councilman who took bribes so regularly he probably filed them as income. All witnesses, all people who would remember what happened tonight. That was the point. Silas didn't just want Elisa scared. He wanted her humiliated so publicly that she'd have no choice but to run. Dom kept walking, past the bar, past the tables where men cut into steaks and talked in low voices about things that would send ordinary people to prison. Booth 12 waited in the corner. Empty, reserved. The same booth where he'd sold his soul. He slid in, faced out, could see the entire restaurant from here. Every entrance, every exit, every person who'd witnessed what came next. A waiter appeared. Older guy, professional. Good evening, Mr. Thorne. Can I start you with something to drink? Scotch. Neat. The waiter disappeared. Returned 30 seconds later with a glass. Top shelf. They knew what he liked here. They knew everything here. Dom took a sip. The alcohol burned going down but didn't calm his nerves. He checked his watch again. 10:09 p.m. 6 minutes. He looked around the restaurant, wondered if any of these men had ever been asked to do something like this. Wondered if they'd done it. Wondered if it haunted them afterward or if they just filed it away under necessary evils and moved on. 10:12 p.m. His phone buzzed. Text from Robbie. Simple. direct. Execute. No hesitation. Dom put the phone away. 10:14 p.m. Movement in the back. A woman emerged from the kitchen area, dark hair pulled back, black uniform. Very pregnant. She carried an order pad and moved carefully, like every step required thought. Elisa Fiore. She was making her rounds, checking on tables, refilling water glasses, taking orders, just doing her job. She had no idea what was coming. No idea that the next 2 minutes would destroy her life in this city. Dom's stomach twisted. She looked tired. Young. Scared of something already, even before he opened his mouth. Like she'd been running from something and knew it was catching up. 10:15 p.m. She turned toward his booth, started walking over. This was it. The moment. The favor. The price. Dom's mind raced through alternatives one last time. He could walk out, refuse, face whatever consequences Silas threatened, let his empire collapse, start over somewhere else. But that wasn't realistic. You didn't say no to Silas Sterling. You didn't break agreements with men like that. Not if you wanted to live. Not if you wanted anyone to ever trust you again. Elisa reached his booth, pulled out her order pad, gave him a small professional smile, the kind waitresses gave customers 100 times a night. "Good evening," she said quietly. "Have you decided on something, or do you need a few more minutes?" Her voice was soft, polite, completely unaware. Dom looked at her, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion, the fear she was trying to hide, the weight of whatever she was carrying alongside that baby. He thought about his own mother, thought about the women in his life who'd sacrificed everything to keep him safe, thought about the code he'd tried to live by, even in this dirty world. Then he thought about Silas Sterling's voice on the phone. Cold, certain, threatening everything Dom had built. He took a breath, rose to his feet. His hand lifted. And this is where our story began. His hand came down hard. The sound of his palm hitting the wooden table exploded through the Viridian like a thunderclap. Glasses rattled. Silverware jumped. The bartender's hand froze mid-pour, whiskey splashing over the rim. Every conversation in the restaurant died instantly. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward booth 12. Dom was standing now, towering over Elisa, his face twisted into rage he didn't feel but had to perform. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to stop, to sit down, to apologize. But Silas Sterling's voice echoed in his head. Execute, no hesitation. His fingers stabbed toward her belly. His voice came out loud, harsh, carrying across the entire restaurant. I don't care who you are, or who you think you are. Elisa took a small step back. Not from fear, just instinct. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. You spilled my water, you pathetic, clumsy disaster. He wasn't even sure there was water on the table. Didn't matter. The accusation wasn't the point. The humiliation was. The room was completely silent now. Even the kitchen noise had stopped. Someone back there must have heard, must have come to see what was happening. Dom pushed forward, made his voice louder, harsher. Get out. Get out of this city. I never want to see your face here again. A woman at a nearby table gasped. Actually gasped. Her dinner companion put a hand on her arm, warning her to stay quiet, stay out of it. You are trash, and you are fired. The words felt like poison in his mouth. Every syllable was a betrayal of something fundamental. His mother would have slapped him for talking to any woman like this. His father, for all his faults, had taught him that pregnant women were sacred, untouchable. But here he was, breaking every rule, crossing every line, because Silas Sterling demanded it, because he'd signed papers 3 weeks ago promising to do exactly this. Dom sat down hard. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the table to hide it. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd done it. The performance was complete, witnessed by everyone who mattered. Mission accomplished. He waited for her to cry, to run, to break down the way someone should when they'd just been publicly destroyed. Elisa did none of those things. She just stood there, completely still. Her order pad hung at her side. Her face was calm, not defiant, not angry, just calm, like she'd been expecting this, like she'd prepared for it. The silence in the restaurant stretched, uncomfortable, heavy. The developer Dom knew was staring at him like he'd just witnessed a murder. The union boss looked disgusted. Even the councilman, who'd done far worse things for far less reason, seemed shocked. Dom had just committed career suicide in their world, broken the code, shown everyone that Dominic Thorne, the young boss who prided himself on being better than the violent old guard, was actually just another thug who'd terrorize a pregnant woman. His reputation was destroyed. But the job was done. Elisa would leave. Sterling would be satisfied. Dom's debt would be paid. That was what he told himself as he sat there, trembling, unable to look at her. Then Elisa moved. Not away. Toward him. She leaned in. Just slightly. Just enough that her voice would carry to Dom clearly. Her order pad stayed at her side. Her hand stayed on her belly, but her eyes weren't on Dom anymore. They were focused on someone else, someone at the bar. Dom followed her gaze. Saw a man he didn't recognize, ordinary looking, cheap jacket, nervous hands wrapped around a glass of beer. The man saw Elisa looking at him and went pale. What was happening? Elisa's voice came out steady, quiet. But in that suffocating silence, every word landed like a hammer. Tell Silas Sterling. Dom's blood went cold. She was saying Sterling's name, out loud, in front of everyone, that his insurance policy is a lie. Insurance policy. The exact words Sterling had used, the exact terms of their deal. How did she know that? How could she possibly know that? And that Frankie is already talking to Boston. The world stopped. Dom's mind went blank, then exploded with questions. Frankie, Boston, insurance policy. She wasn't just a witness. She wasn't just a waitress. She was connected to something bigger, something Dom had been pulled into without understanding. Silas hadn't wanted her scared. He'd wanted her silenced. And she'd just used Dom's public spectacle to deliver a message to Sterling that would detonate like a bomb. Around them, the restaurant remained frozen, but Dom could see it in their faces. The recognition, the understanding. These were men who lived in secrets and leverage. They knew exactly what kind of information had just been exposed. Silas Sterling's insurance policy. A lie. Someone named Frankie, talking to Boston. And Dominic Thorne, standing in the middle of it, publicly attached to whatever was about to explode. The man at the bar dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. He bolted from his stool, heading for the back exit, moving fast. Elisa didn't watch him go. She just stood there, looking at Dom now, her expression unreadable. Dom opened his mouth. No words came out. His brain couldn't process what just happened. He'd been used, manipulated, turned into a weapon in someone else's war. Heavy footsteps echoed from the side entrance. Dom turned, already knowing what he'd see. Silas Sterling stepped through the private door, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. His face showed nothing. No anger, no surprise, no emotion at all. But his eyes told a different story. He'd heard. Every word. And from the way he looked at Dom, then at Elisa, then back at Dom, one thing was absolutely clear. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. The sentence hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The restaurant existed in a state of suspended animation, everyone processing what they'd just heard. Then the chaos started. Low voices erupted from every corner, urgent whispers, heads turning, men leaning across tables to murmur to their companions. Phone screens lighting up as people texted contacts, passed along information, tried to figure out what just happened. Dom sat frozen in booth 12, his mind trying to catch up to reality. Insurance policy. Those were Sterling's exact words, the private terms of their deal. Nobody knew about that. Nobody except Dom, Robbie, and Sterling himself. But this pregnant waitress just said it out loud, in front of 50 witnesses. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. And Frankie. That name meant nothing to Dom, but it clearly meant something to everyone else. He watched the recognition flash across faces throughout the restaurant. Frankie talking to Boston. That combination of words was significant. Dangerous. Dom's eyes tracked back to the man at the bar, the one Elisa had been staring at when she delivered her message. He was halfway to the back exit now, moving fast, abandoning his beer and his coat. That was Frankie. Had to be. And he was running. Dom's training kicked in through the shock. You didn't run unless you were guilty or terrified, often both. This Frankie character had just been exposed, and whatever he'd done was bad enough that his first instinct was to flee. But flee from what? From whom? The developer Dom knew caught his eye, mouthed 2 words, "You're finished." That snapped Dom back to his own situation. He looked around the restaurant, saw the judgment, the calculation. The men here weren't disgusted by his treatment of Elisa anymore. They were disgusted by his stupidity. Because everyone in this room now believed Dom was involved in whatever Sterling's insurance policy covered. They believed he knew about Frankie. They believed he was part of some operation connected to Boston. He'd been publicly tied to Sterling's secrets. And in their world, being tied to someone else's exposure meant you went down with them. Dom's hands gripped the table harder. His mind raced. Sterling had set him up, used him. The whole spectacle wasn't about scaring Elisa away. It was about something else entirely. Something Dom didn't understand. But everyone else seemed to understand perfectly. The union boss stood up abruptly, threw cash on his table, left without finishing his meal. 2 other men followed. Within 30 seconds, half the restaurant was moving toward exits, not running. That would show weakness. But leaving, getting distance, separating themselves from whatever was about to happen. Rats, leaving a sinking ship. Dom watched them go. Watched his reputation, his credibility, his carefully built network evaporate in real time. All because of one sentence from a pregnant waitress. He looked at Elisa. She was still standing there, still calm. She met his eyes, and for just a moment, Dom saw something in her expression. Not fear, not anger. Pity. She pitied him. That was worse than anything else. Worse than the humiliation. Worse than the exposure. This woman, who he'd just verbally destroyed in front of 50 people, felt sorry for him. Because she understood something he didn't. She knew exactly what she'd done. Knew exactly what it would cost. And she'd done it anyway. Dom opened his mouth to speak, to demand answers, to ask what the hell was happening. But before he could form words, the sound of heavy footsteps cut through the chaos. Everyone stopped, looked toward the private side entrance. The door opened slowly, deliberately. Silas Sterling walked in like he was entering his own living room, unhurried, unbothered. His silver hair was perfect, his suit had no wrinkles, his expression showed nothing but mild interest. But Dom had spent enough time reading powerful men to see beneath the surface. Sterling's jaw was tight, his eyes were cold. The hand at his side had a slight tremor, quickly controlled. He was furious. No, not furious. Something worse. Calculating. Already moving pieces on a board Dom couldn't see. Sterling's eyes swept the restaurant, catalogued who was still there, who'd left, who mattered. His gaze landed on the space where Frankie had been sitting, the abandoned beer glass, the broken glass on the floor. Then he looked at Elisa. She didn't look away, didn't flinch, just stood there, one hand on her belly, meeting the gaze of the most dangerous man in New York with complete calm. Sterling's expression didn't change, but something passed between them, some understanding, some acknowledgement. Then his eyes shifted to Dom. Dom felt the weight of that gaze, felt Sterling assessing him, measuring his usefulness, deciding his fate. Sterling crossed the restaurant. His shoes clicked against the hardwood, every step deliberate, every movement precise. He stopped at booth 12, looked down at Dom like he was examining an interesting insect. "Well done, Dominic," Sterling said. His voice was perfectly level, perfectly controlled, loud enough for the remaining patrons to hear. "You made your spectacle." Dom couldn't read his tone. Was that approval? Mockery? Threat? Sterling's hand came down on Dom's shoulder. Heavy, deliberate, a proprietary gesture that sent a clear message to everyone watching. Dominic Thorne belonged to Silas Sterling now. "Now," Sterling continued, his grip tightening slightly. "She is my problem." He turned to Elisa, raised his hand, not to strike, just a gesture, almost casual. And Elisa did something that made Dom's blood run cold. She nodded. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but definitely a nod. An acknowledgement, an agreement. She just exposed Sterling in front of 50 people, and she was nodding to him like they were following a script. What in God's name was happening? Elisa turned, walked away from the booth, not toward the kitchen where staff belonged, not toward the back exit where Frankie had fled. She walked toward the main entrance, calm, purposeful, like she was leaving for the night after a normal shift. The restaurant doors opened before she reached them. A car waited outside, black, expensive, engine already running. A man stood by the passenger door, massive, 6.5 feet tall, built like a wall, wearing a suit that probably had to be custom-made to fit his frame. He opened the back door for Elisa. Dom caught a glimpse of the man's face, familiar somehow, like he'd seen him before but couldn't place where. Elisa slid into the car without looking back. The door closed. The car pulled away into the Manhattan night. Gone. Dom sat there, his mind spinning. What just happened? Who was that man? Why did Elisa leave with him willingly? Sterling's hand was still on his shoulder, still heavy, still sending that message of ownership. The girl and the child are safe, Dominic, Sterling said quietly. Only Dom could hear now. You did your job. Safe? She was safe? Who was that? Dom whispered. Who took her? Sterling's grip tightened one more time, then released. He sat down across from Dom in the booth, smoothed his jacket, looked completely relaxed. Like nothing unusual had just happened. Like his entire operation hadn't just been exposed. We need to talk, Sterling said, about what just happened, about who Elisa really is, and about why you're not going to like the answers. Dom stared at Sterling across the table. His hands were still shaking, his mind was still trying to process what just happened. The whole restaurant had witnessed his humiliation of a pregnant woman, then watched that same woman detonate a bomb that tied him to Sterling's secrets, then watched her leave voluntarily with some massive stranger. And Sterling was sitting there like they were having a casual business dinner. What the hell just happened? Dom's voice came out rough, angry. Sterling folded his hands on the table. You did exactly what I asked you to do. You asked me to scare her, make her run. She didn't run, Sterling. She delivered a message. To you, using me as her messenger boy. Dom leaned forward. Who is she? Someone I've been protecting. Protecting? You told me she was a loose end, a witness who needed to disappear. She is disappearing, Sterling said calmly. Just not the way you thought. Dom's jaw clenched. Stop playing games. I just destroyed my reputation in front of every connected person in Manhattan. The least you can do is tell me why. Sterling considered this, then nodded slightly. Fair enough. You deserve some answers. Not all of them. Not yet. But some. He gestured to the nearly empty restaurant. Most of the patrons had fled. Only a few remained, keeping their distance, pretending not to listen. The staff had retreated to the kitchen. Elisa Fiore is not just a waitress, Sterling began. She's been working for me for 2 years, providing information, intelligence. She has connections to Boston that I've found useful. Boston, Dom repeated. That word kept coming up. The Giordano family? Yes, Lucia Giordano, the Contessa. She runs one of the tightest operations in New England, very protective of her people, very vengeful when crossed. Dom's mind was racing. And Elisa has connections to them. Had, Sterling corrected, past tense. She left that life 2 years ago. Came here, started over. I gave her a job, a new identity, safety. In exchange, she gave me information about Boston's operations. Why would you need information about Boston? You work with them. Sterling's expression remained neutral. I work with everyone, Dominic. That's what makes me valuable. But information is insurance. Knowledge is leverage. I like to know what my partners are doing, especially when they might become problems. Dom shook his head. This doesn't make sense. If she's working for you, why did you need me to humiliate her? Why the spectacle? Because 2 days ago, someone threatened to expose her. Sterling said, someone discovered who she really is, who she used to be, and more importantly, whose child she's carrying. The child. Dom had almost forgotten about that part. Whose child? He asked. Sterling paused, chose his words carefully. Someone who used to run your territory. Someone who died a year ago under convenient circumstances. Someone whose family in Boston would very much like to know that his child exists. The pieces started clicking together in Dom's mind. Vincent Moretti, his predecessor, the man whose death had opened the door for Dom to take over. Vinnie Moretti, Dom whispered. Sterling didn't confirm or deny, just watched. Elisa was Vinny's woman, Dom continued, working it out. She got pregnant. She ran. And now someone in Boston knows about the kid. Someone named Frankie, Sterling said, low-level hustler, greedy, stupid. He found out about Elisa and decided to blackmail me, threatened to tell the Giordano family about the child unless I paid him. So you used me to get rid of both problems, Dom said, anger rising. Scare Elisa into leaving, expose Frankie in the process. No, Sterling said. I used you to create a distraction. Frankie was never the real threat. He was a symptom. The real problem was that Elisa's cover was compromised. She needed to leave New York, but it had to look forced. Had to look like she was being driven out, not choosing to go. Otherwise, Boston would suspect she was still connected to me. Dom sat back. So the whole thing was theater. You made me the villain so she could be the victim. Essentially. And the message she delivered? About your insurance policy being a lie? Sterling's expression hardened slightly, first crack in his calm exterior. That was not part of the plan. She went off script. Yes. Why? Sterling was quiet for a moment. Because Elisa is smarter than I gave her credit for. She understood that just leaving wasn't enough. She needed to burn her bridges completely. Make sure everyone in this city knew she'd betrayed me. That way, Boston would believe she's a genuine refugee, not a spy. That's brilliant, Dom said bitterly, except it also burned me. Everyone here thinks I'm connected to your secrets now. You are connected to my secrets, Sterling said bluntly. You have been since the moment you signed those papers 3 weeks ago. Tonight just made it public. Dom wanted to hit something, wanted to flip the table, wanted to walk out and never look back. But he couldn't. He was trapped. Had been trapped since the moment his development deal collapsed and he'd needed Sterling's help. Who was the man? Dom asked. The driver. The one who took her. Sterling's face remained impassive. Her brother. Her brother. Yes. He's been watching over her since she arrived in New York, making sure she stayed safe, making sure Boston didn't find her. And now he's taking her where? Somewhere far from here. Somewhere the Giordano family can't reach. Somewhere she can raise Vinny's child in peace. Dom studied Sterling's face. There was something he wasn't saying, some piece still missing. You're protecting Vinny Moretti's heir, Dom said slowly. Why? What do you gain from that? Sterling smiled. Finally. A real smile, cold and calculating. That, Dominic, is a question for another time. For now, you need to understand your position. What happened tonight has consequences. The men who were here, the ones who heard Elisa's message, they're going to talk. Word will spread. By morning, all of New York will know that Dominic Thorne is connected to Silas Sterling's operations. You mean I'm owned by you? I mean we're partners, Sterling corrected. Whether you like it or not. Dom's phone buzzed. Text from Robbie. 3 words. What happened? He didn't respond. Couldn't explain it in a text. Could barely explain it to himself. There's more, Dom said, looking at Sterling. You're not telling me everything. Of course not, Sterling agreed. But you'll learn the rest soon enough. When? Sterling stood, smoothed his jacket, prepared to leave. When you need to know, he said. For now, go home, rest. Tomorrow, we'll discuss how to manage the fallout, how to turn tonight's disaster into an opportunity. An opportunity. You're connected to me now, publicly. That makes you more valuable, more protected. The men who were here tonight, they'll be cautious around you. They'll wonder what you know. What leverage you have. Use that. Build on it. He started to walk away. Stopped. Turned back. Oh, and Dominic, the man at the bar, Frankie, he won't be a problem anymore. Dom's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Sterling's expression was unreadable. It means loose ends get tied up, one way or another. He left through the side entrance, the same way he'd arrived. Dom sat alone in booth 12. The restaurant was almost empty now. Just a few stragglers finishing drinks. The staff cleaning up. His phone buzzed again. Robbie calling now. Dom answered. What happened? Robbie's voice was urgent. I'm getting calls. Everyone's saying you're finished. Everyone's saying you're Sterling's puppet now. I don't know what happened, Dom said honestly. I don't understand any of it. Come back to the office. We need to strategize. Dom hung up. Stood. His legs felt weak. He left cash on the table for a drink he'd barely touched. Walked out into the Manhattan night. Somewhere in this city, Elisa Fiore was disappearing with her brother and Vinnie Moretti's unborn child. Somewhere in this city, Frankie was about to learn what happened when you blackmailed Silas Sterling. And somewhere in this city, Dom's reputation was being rebuilt as Sterling's creature instead of his own man. He'd thought he understood the game. He'd been so wrong. Dom made it 3 blocks from the Viridian before his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Almost kept walking toward his car, toward his office, toward anything that felt normal. But in his world, you answered unknown calls. Because sometimes they were warnings. Sometimes they were opportunities. Sometimes they were the difference between seeing tomorrow and not. He answered. "Turn around," Sterling's voice said. "There's a car behind you. Black sedan. Get in." Dom stopped walking, looked over his shoulder. Sure enough, a black sedan idled at the curb 20 feet back. Tinted windows, driver barely visible. "I'm done with your games," Dom said. "This isn't a game. This is the explanation you demanded. Get in the car or spend the rest of your life wondering what really happened tonight." The line went dead. Dom stood there on the sidewalk. People passed him. Normal people heading home from normal jobs, living normal lives. None of them knew they were walking past a man whose entire world had just been reconstructed without his permission. He walked to the sedan. The back door opened. Silas Sterling sat inside, alone. No driver Dom could see, which meant the car was being controlled remotely, or the driver was hidden behind that partition. Dom got in. The door closed. The car pulled into traffic. "Where are we going?" Dom asked. "Nowhere. Everywhere. It doesn't matter. We're going to drive while I tell you the rest. The parts I couldn't say in that restaurant with people listening. The parts you need to understand before tomorrow morning when New York starts asking you questions." Dom settled into the leather seat. "I'm listening." Sterling was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. Then he began. "Vincent Moretti was a problem," Sterling said. "Brilliant but erratic, violent but unpredictable. He ran your territory well enough, but he was getting greedy. Started asking questions about the development deals I was setting up. Started demanding bigger cuts. Started threatening to expose certain financial arrangements if I didn't give him what he wanted." "So you killed him," Dom said flatly. "I arranged for him to have an accident," Sterling corrected. "There's a difference. Murder is messy. Accidents are clean. His car went off a bridge. Tragic. Unfortunate. Nobody asked too many questions because nobody wanted the answers." Dom's stomach turned. He'd inherited his position from a man Sterling had murdered. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand how you got here," Sterling said. "Vinnie's death created a vacancy. I needed someone to fill it. Someone smart enough to run sophisticated operations. Someone young enough to be molded. Someone desperate enough to be controlled. You chose me." "I chose you," Sterling confirmed. "I watched you for 6 months, studied your operations, your methods, your weaknesses. Then I arranged for your development deal to collapse." The words hit Dom like a physical blow. "What?" "The zoning change that killed your financial district project? That was me. I have people in city planning. It took one phone call, one signature. Your $8 million loss was engineered specifically to put you in a position where you'd need my help." Dom couldn't breathe. The betrayal, the manipulation, it went back further than he'd imagined. "You destroyed me so you could save me. I created a problem so I could provide the solution," Sterling said. "It's an old strategy. Effective. You came to me desperate. You agreed to terms you never would have accepted otherwise, and now you're exactly where I need you to be." "Which is where?" "Publicly connected to my operations, dependent on my protection, useful." The car turned a corner. Dom didn't know where they were anymore. Didn't care. "Elisa," he said. "Tell me about Elisa." Sterling nodded. "Elisa Fiore, 25 years old, engaged to Vincent Moretti. She was different from the other women in his life, educated, thoughtful. She saw the violence, the corruption, and she hated it. When she discovered she was pregnant, she realized she couldn't raise a child in that world. So she ran. She tried to run. But running from the Giordano family isn't easy. They have resources, connections. They would have found her eventually. So she came to me. "Why you?" Because I'd been cultivating her for months, meeting with her secretly, offering her a way out. She knew things about Vinny's operations, things I needed, so we made a deal. She'd give me information about Boston's activities. In exchange, I'd protect her, give her a new life, keep her safe. And her brother? Sterling's expression shifted slightly. Marco, her older brother, former military, very protective, very capable. He's been watching over her since she arrived in New York, living in the shadows, making sure no one from Boston got close. You've been protecting Vinny Moretti's child this whole time, Dom said. Why? What's the angle? Leverage, Sterling said simply. The child is Vinny Moretti's heir. The Giordano family values bloodlines. If they knew the child existed, they'd want custody, want to raise him in the family, want to groom him to eventually take a position in their organization. So you're keeping the heir hidden to maintain leverage over Boston. Exactly. As long as I know where the child is and they don't, I have something they want, something I can trade if necessary. Dom shook his head. That's cold, even for this world. That's survival. The child is safe, protected, growing up far from violence. Elisa gets to be a mother in peace. Everyone wins. Except Vinny's family doesn't know their grandchild exists. They don't need to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The car drove through Manhattan. Lights streaked past the windows. Tonight, Dom said. Explain tonight. Why the spectacle? Why use me? Sterling leaned forward. 2 days ago, Frankie DeLuca contacted me, demanded $500,000 or he'd tell Boston about Elisa and the child. He had proof. Vinny's ring, photos, connections that could verify his story. So you needed him eliminated. I needed him exposed first, then eliminated. If I simply killed him, his information might surface later. But if I exposed him publicly, showed everyone that he was a blackmailer, a rat, then his credibility would be destroyed. Anything he said afterward would be dismissed as the desperate lies of a criminal. That's why Elisa said his name, in front of everyone. Yes, she identified him, made him run, showed everyone he was guilty. Now if his body turns up, which it will, nobody will ask too many questions. Just another hustler who made the wrong enemy. Dom felt sick. And me? Where do I fit in this? You were the delivery mechanism, Sterling said. I needed Elisa to have a reason to speak, to deliver that message. A public confrontation gave her that opportunity. Your spectacle created the chaos. Her response weaponized it. She knew, Dom said. She knew exactly what was going to happen. She knew the plan. Yes. But her message wasn't part of your plan. You said that in the restaurant. Sterling's jaw tightened. No. That part she added herself. The insurance policy comment. That was her improvisation. Why? Because she's smarter than I anticipated. She understood that just leaving wasn't enough. She needed to make sure Boston believed she'd betrayed me, burned her bridges completely. By exposing our arrangement publicly, she made herself look like a refugee instead of an asset, which protects her long term. Exactly. Boston will hear about tonight. They'll hear that Elisa Fiore exposed Silas Sterling's secrets. They'll believe she's running from me, not working with me, which means when she disappears, they'll stop looking for her. Dom processed this, the layers, the manipulation, everyone using everyone else. And Marco, her brother, he's been working for you all along? Since before Vinny died. He wanted his sister out of that life. I gave him the tools to make it happen. Does he know you killed Vinny? Sterling was quiet. He knows Vinny's death was convenient for everyone except Vinny, which meant yes, Marco knew. And he'd helped anyway, because protecting his sister mattered more than avenging his sister's dead lover. The car slowed. They were back near the Viridian, a full circle. Frankie, Dom said. What happened to him? Sterling checked his watch. By now? He made it to the kitchen, tried to escape through the back alley, encountered some associates of mine who were waiting. He resisted. Things got physical. He didn't survive. His body will be found in 3 days in the East River. Police will find his blackmail attempts in his phone records. Case closed. You killed him. I removed a problem. There's a difference. There really isn't. Sterling looked at him directly. Welcome to the real game, Dominic. The one where powerful men make impossible choices and live with the consequences. You've been playing in the shallow end. Tonight, you got pulled into the deep water. I didn't ask for this. You asked for $8 million. This is the price. Not just the favor you performed tonight, but the knowledge you now carry. You know how Vinny really died. You know about Elisa. You know about the heir. You know about Frankie. You're complicit now, in everything. Dom stared out the window. His reflection looked back at him. He barely recognized himself. What happens now? Sterling opened the car door. Now you go home. Tomorrow, you control the narrative. Tell people tonight was about business, territory, respect. Don't mention Elisa specifically. Let the rumors do the work. By next week, everyone will believe you're my partner instead of my puppet. But I am your puppet. Only if you think like one, Sterling said. Smart men turn limitations into leverage. You're connected to me now. Use it, build on it, or spend the rest of your short career resenting it. Your choice. He stepped out of the car. Dom followed. They were standing outside. The Viridian again. The restaurant was dark now, closed, cleaned up, like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Sterling walked toward the entrance, stopped, turned back. One more thing, Dominic. The most important thing. What? Everything I told you tonight? It's the truth, but it's not the whole truth. There are pieces still missing, questions you haven't thought to ask yet. When you figure out what those questions are, come find me. We'll have another conversation. He disappeared into the shadows. Dom stood alone on the empty street. Somewhere in this city, Elisa and her brother were driving toward a new life with Vinnie Moretti's unborn child. Somewhere in this city, Frankie's body was cooling in an alley or already in the river. Somewhere in this city, men were talking about what happened tonight, spreading rumors, building legends that had nothing to do with truth. And Dom was standing at the center of it all, tied to a man whose full plan he still didn't understand. What questions hadn't he asked? What pieces were still missing? He'd find out eventually. But right now, he just wanted to go home. Wanted to pretend, just for a few hours, that he was still the man he'd been yesterday. Before the restaurant, before the spectacle, before one sentence from a pregnant waitress had detonated his entire world. Before he learned that everything, from the beginning, had been a lie. Dom didn't go home that night. He drove to his office in Staten Island, sat in the dark, stared at nothing, tried to piece together the wreckage of his life. His phone kept buzzing, Robbie calling, associates calling, people he'd worked with, people he owed favors to, people who owed him favors. Everyone wanted to know what happened. Everyone wanted to understand where they stood now that Dominic Thorne was publicly connected to Silas Sterling. He ignored them all. Around 3 a.m., his office door opened. He didn't bother looking up, already knew who it was. Robbie walked in, didn't turn on the lights, just sat down across from Dom's desk. You gonna tell me what happened? Robbie asked. Would you believe me if I did? Probably not, but try anyway. So Dom told him. Everything. The deal 3 weeks ago, the insurance policy, Elisa, Vinny, the child, Frankie, the spectacle, the revelations in the car, all of it. Robbie listened without interrupting. When Dom finished, he was quiet for a long time. You're finished, Robbie finally said. I know. Not finished like losing power, finished like you're not your own man anymore. You're Sterling's now, completely. I know that too. Robbie stood, walked to the window, looked out at Staten Island. Dom's territory, except it wasn't really his anymore. Maybe it never had been. There's something you're not seeing, Robbie said. What? Everyone who was in that restaurant tonight, everyone who heard Elisa say Sterling's name and Frankie's name, they all heard you yelling at her right before. They all watched you create the spectacle that gave her the platform to expose Sterling's secrets. So they think you were part of it. They think you knew what was coming. They think you and Sterling planned the whole thing together. Dom's stomach dropped. He hadn't thought about it that way. But I didn't know. I was as surprised as anyone. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality in our world. The perception is that Dominic Thorne and Silas Sterling orchestrated a public exposure of a blackmailer named Frankie. And by tomorrow morning, when Frankie's body is found, the perception will be that you helped kill him. The room felt smaller suddenly, colder, I didn't kill anyone. You created the distraction that exposed him. You made him run. You gave Sterling's people time to position themselves in that alley. In everyone's eyes, you're complicit. Dom stood up, started pacing. That's insane. I was following orders. I didn't know about Frankie. Didn't know he'd be there. Didn't know what Elisa was going to say. But you knew something, Robbie said. You knew Sterling wanted her gone. You knew you were being used for something bigger than just firing a waitress. You knew, and you did it anyway. Because I had no choice. There's always a choice. You just didn't like the alternatives. Dom stopped pacing, looked at his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor. Are you saying I should have refused? I'm saying you should understand what refusing would have cost you, and what accepting has cost you. Because the price isn't just your reputation, it's your freedom. Robbie walked toward the door, stopped before leaving. Sterling owns you now, not through debt, through blood. You're tied to a murder. If you ever try to break away, if you ever try to expose him or distance yourself, he'll make sure everyone knows you helped kill Frankie DeLuca. You'll be implicated, arrested, destroyed. So what do I do? You embrace it. You become what everyone already thinks you are. Sterling's partner, his enforcer, his creature. You play the role so well that people forget there was ever a time when you weren't his. I become the villain. You become powerful, Robbie corrected. Different kind of power than you wanted, but power nonetheless. He left. The door closed. Dom was alone again. The sun started rising outside his window. Friday morning, May 9th, 2008. 24 hours ago, he'd been preparing for the most distasteful act of his career. Now he was living with the consequences. His phone buzzed one more time. Text from an unknown number. He knew who it was before he opened it. The Giordano family in Boston is asking questions about Frankie. They'll hear about last night soon. You should prepare for a visit from their representatives. They'll want to understand your relationship with me. Tell them the truth. We're partners now. Tell them you protect my interests. Tell them anyone who threatens me threatens you. Welcome to the family, Dominic. The message wasn't signed, didn't need to be. Dom read it 3 times, then deleted it. But the words stayed burned into his memory. Welcome to the family. He'd spent a year building his reputation as an independent operator. Smart, strategic, not owned by anyone. And in one night, one sentence from a pregnant waitress had destroyed all of that. Elisa Fiore. She was somewhere safe now, somewhere far from this city. Raising Vinnie Moretti's child away from violence and corruption, she got her happy ending. Frankie DeLuca. He was dead in an alley or floating in the East River. Got exactly what he deserved for being greedy and stupid. Silas Sterling. He'd eliminated a threat, protected his asset, and gained complete control over a rising young boss. Won on every front. And Dominic Thorne? He'd lost everything that mattered while keeping everything that didn't. He still had his territory, his money, his crew. But his freedom, his autonomy, his ability to make choices without Sterling's shadow hanging over him, gone. He was a puppet now, a well-dressed, well-paid, well-respected puppet, but a puppet nonetheless. One sentence. That was all it took. Tell Silas Sterling that his insurance policy is a lie, and that Frankie is already talking to Boston. 15 words that reshaped the entire underworld landscape of New York. 15 words that exposed secrets, ended lives, and trapped a young boss in a web he couldn't escape. Dom looked out at the sunrise. Somewhere in this city, men were waking up to the news. Frankie's body would be found. Questions would be asked. Rumors would spread. And through it all, one truth would remain. Dominic Thorne belonged to Silas Sterling now. Not by choice, not by preference, but by the simple, brutal reality of power and consequence. He'd thought he understood the game, thought he was smart enough, careful enough, strategic enough to play without getting played. He'd been so wrong. The predator had been prey all along. He just hadn't known it until the trap closed. Friday morning arrived. The city woke up. Life went on. And Dom learned to live with what he'd become. So, there it is. One sentence. That's all it took to reshape an entire empire. Think about this for a moment. Dom thought he was the predator. He walked into that restaurant believing he was in control. But from the very beginning, he was just a piece on someone else's chessboard. And that terrifying realization that everything you thought you controlled was actually controlling you, that's the nightmare that keeps powerful people awake at night. Now, I have a question for you, and this one matters. Who was the real villain in this story? Was it Dom, who humiliated a pregnant woman to save himself? Was it Silas, who orchestrated everything from the shadows? Or was it Elisa, who played her part perfectly while everyone underestimated her? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And here's what I need you to understand. You just spent time with this story. You invested your attention, your emotions. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it kept you on the edge of your seat, then you owe it to yourself and to everyone else who deserves to experience this to smash that like button. Share this video with someone who loves psychological thrillers. Subscribe to this channel because stories like this, complex, layered, with no easy answers, these are rare. And if the algorithm decides this video isn't worth promoting because people didn't engage, then incredible stories like this disappear into the void. Don't be the person who experiences something powerful and then does nothing about it. Engage, comment, share, subscribe. Let's build something here. Because Dom's story? It's far from over. And what happens next, let's just say Silas Sterling's house of cards might not be as stable as he thinks. Thank you for watching. Now go leave that comment. Who was the real villain?